Okay, hi. I am going to do an overview of Theater of Pain. So this run is not one we actually did on time. I think we were 1 minute over, but I'll just talk about the mechanics and tips that I have for this dungeon instead of needing to coincide it with a run that was successful. So since it is Fortified Week, we decided to pull all four and use heroism on this pull. Um, Something that's obviously very important that perhaps not people that perhaps not everybody knows right off the bat is that the Raging Bloodhorn needs to be soothed during his cast. So if you're really, really fast, you can avoid any damage at all. But usually you get at least one tick. For theater, I have been running Misery and Psychic Link to work with my legendary Talbadars. And I think I'm using Mindbender as well because it is not tyrannical. But I actually don't feel too confident with my damage this dungeon. I feel like in other wings, I start to really fall behind, and I don't know. It's not as good as it can be, that's for sure. So for this boss, they took out the stun lady that used to spawn. Like she used to come in biz and then she would jump on someone and channel on them, and you needed to CC or interrupt for to break your person out. And I feel like a lot of people didn't actually pay attention to that, or they didn't call out for it, and that single channel can actually kill you. It deals a fair amount of damage. So, anyways, I'd say the most important cast to interrupt here is Searing Death is I think that's what it's called. It's by Satel, the accused. Um, and yeah, Searing Death. So as a shadow priest, unfortunately, our interrupt is an incredibly long cooldown. So I do feel like for the majority of this fight, I am pretty much just doing DPS rotations and not focusing so much on interrupts. However, I will say that I need to or would like to use VE more. So VE is similar to my mentality when it comes to Boon of the Ascended when I play Disc. I have a bad habit of um, associating that cooldown with one purpose, and both of them I want to make sure that I use them on prides. But there's so many other times in the dungeon where I can use it that I just don't think to because I don't know. I just don't. It's not habit for me, and I want to build that habit. So, um, even as disc in this dungeon, like I was healing a lower key the other day, and I just literally don't use boon until the very first pride, which is a very long time into the dungeon for this place because it starts off with trash and then boss immediately. So that's just a little tidbit. Honestly, VE is a really great cooldown. It's also just 2 minutes, so it's fairly short. I would actually say for this first top platform, use it on the first pull in because I would definitely try to sync it with your cooldowns because then you're going to do insane healing with it. If I used it just blindly with nothing right now, I think I would probably get, I don't know, at most 1,000 to 1,500 heals per second. But if you use it with your cooldowns, I actually would like to see how much healing you do because if we're doing like, I don't know, 12k DPS with heroism and PI and void eruption, imagine how much healing you're doing. So this part, I made sure to pay attention to which mob name is the one that I need to focus on for this Withering Discharge cast. That is the most important thing to interrupt on packs like this, because if that cast goes off, it deals a lot of AoE damage to everybody and applies a disease to them. So also, this dungeon is extremely disease focused. So it is our job to make sure we are dispelling those debuffs off. Um, in this clip, I don't have my weak aura added yet, but I added a new abolish disease cooldown tracker to my weak aura just so I know when I can use it instead of like in the past, I would kind of just spam that button hoping that the cooldown was off. Okay, this pull tends to really suck, right? What I do like to do, as you just saw, is I like to help um, the tanks get back into a safer position with Leap of Faith after they've grouped them up. Um, so I don't have Void Eruption up for this pack right here. And what I did not do that I started doing before is use if someone's actually channeling, if they're channeling on somebody and we don't have an interrupt, then I will want to use Shackle Undead to break that channel. And then we just have to clear up the shades. If you have a rogue, I highly recommend you shroud to the other side before you pull the next pack, because I have died so many times when I was healing and not playing Shadow yet, because nobody would help me get to the other side. All I have is Feather, and if one of them starts channeling on me, all I can do is either shackle that mob and possibly get hit by the green orbs on the ground, or another mob could end up channeling on me. It's just like, it's difficult for a priest to get over. As Shadow, if I get channeled on, I can disperse, and that breaks the snare and gives me damage reduction. But yeah, if you have a rogue, definitely use that. If you don't, I don't know. I honestly do not always like the run through strat, but if you do the run through strat, people need to help you. Like the classes that don't have an easy way to get across without snare removal, um, definitely have help for that. Oh, actually, I was like, I wanted to choose this run because we were only a minute over, but this part gets very, very slobby from what I remember. I did not end up using my disperse, which is bad. Ideally, you should never die with a defensive up, but I did use healing potion. I did not use file, so I should definitely have used that as well. But we spawned Pride here, and everyone's still dead and running back. Oh, Tank is still here, yeah. So what he did, that I did not agree with, was he pulled the Pride out into the hallway. I don't agree with that at all, because these green swirlies, we can move for them, but they're like, you never want to voluntarily put yourself in this hallway, especially when you have Pride orbs that really you know, make things hectic depending on where you're standing. Um, Something that I've really started to appreciate as well is Desperate Prayer. I love that spell. I use it a lot. Sometimes I use it when I don't need to. And he fucking moved into me right there. So I had to disperse. But yeah, this part just turned out really, really sloppy and messy. Uh, Unfortunate, because I actually feel like this wipe here just wasted a lot of time. But another thing that I also have not been doing very well yet is remembering to pot throughout the dungeon. Like sometimes right before a boss, I'll remember to do it, but ideally I want to get 5 to 6 uses out of it, depending on how long the dungeon is, because it is a 5 minute cooldown. So for this guy, normally if I had VE up, I would definitely use it for this. So I actually managed to use Boon on this guy, but my Boon usage is still very, very awkward. Like I need to start using it. That way I can get used to just that whole rotation. So I actually, when I think about it, Boon is really not that bad. I know it's awkward, but the thing is, if you use Ascended Blast and then you have that cooldown and you don't have a Mind Blast to cast and you don't need to refresh your dots, then I can just use the AoE cast to get a couple more stacks, right? It's not the worst thing. And when I was watching over my HOA video, the heal at the end is just, it's not negligible. Anything like that is helpful compared to nothing, right? And I'm weaving it into my rotation, so it's really not the worst thing. These guys obviously should always be inter. I abandoned people. I forgot that there's shades that's fun and it puts you into combat. Yes, if you click the portal fast enough, you can get through, but it's just it really depends on how the spitefuls spawn, right? They can kind of stagger. So if the last mob dies and the spiteful spawns, that one you can avoid. But if there's one that has been lingering and is targeting someone, that person is like stuck on the platform by himself. Okay, so for this area, you saw that I used VE with my cooldown. So I actually, oh my, wow, look at the healing that I'm doing. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that I did this because I just mentioned it earlier, right? And I don't remember a recent time that I've done cooldowns with VE, but wow, that's incredible. Look at that. It got to 6,000 heals per second. So anyways, I want to talk in a healing perspective really quick because you can see that the hunter has a magic debuff on him. So I have healed this area once, and I went against my instincts, and I did not dispel that off, and instead I chose to heal through it. Um, don't do that. That debuff is absolutely worth dispelling off if your cooldown is available. If two go out, so basically the way that I approach it is right when you land, right when the tank pulls, one debuff goes out. You dispel that immediately off right away. The next one goes out. I think by the time the next one goes out, your cooldown is either completely off or nearly off. But the thing is, they will start to stack. That's why you want to always dispel those off immediately. If you get ahead of them, then you can manage them better. But there will always be a point where two people will have it at the same time. So the moment two people have it at the same time, mass dispel it off, and then you're pretty much kind of caught up. For these guys, I actually, so as you can see, I'm standing near the center of the platform. And the reason I prefer that is because if you stand closer to where the portal is, there's shitty pathing design where there's like crevices and ledges where if you're trying to strafe back and forth, you will run into those things and they will block your path. And then you can get knocked off because you can't move past it. So instead of worrying about that garbage, I stand closer to the front or like closer to the mobs. And what also makes it easier, in my opinion, is that I'm closer, so I can see much easier like which direction the cast is actually going on. Because if you're standing super far, you might think it's pointed in like another direction, but it's actually coming at you. It's just harder to tell. So obviously as a shadow priest, so you see right here, I saw two people with the debuff, so immediately I mass dispelled. I feel like that's the main case that I choose to use mass dispel as a shadow priest. Um, because I used to heal and still do. I mean, there's actually times lately that I've missed healing, so I definitely want to make sure I do it a little bit more. But I would, I mean, that's the ultra helpful part about healing and then playing DPS. I have that experience healing, therefore I know every single place where debuffs occur that I can mass dispel off because as a disc priest, I mass dispel them off in the same areas as well. So, um, yeah, the thing is, I personally expect the healer, if I'm on Discord with my healer and they have a debuff that they can't remove and it might kill somebody, like based on the ticks and how low somebody is, I would say I'm not necessarily going to be aware of needing to mass dispel that because I play with a mentality that healers should know to dispel these things. And um, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I would rather they communicate that to me than for me to preemptively dispel. Like using a mass on one debuff seems like a big waste, right? Especially if I can remove two at once in these situations. Um, but I've mentioned in my Disc Priest tips video about Kotharok, so I'm always going to dispel the first one. I always do every odd number application, which is the very first one, and then 1, 3, 5. Like you can always get every other. I tell people to always stand on the same side of the platform because if I need to actually take time to, visually see where people are and then place my mask, then that's just lame. It's gonna um cause problems because if I mass and I only get one off, that feels like a waste in my opinion, because I can get two and I got one, and the only reason I got one is because of where you were standing. And it's not extremely important to stand spread out or anything for this boss. Another thing that I was not able to test that I really want to, and I still will, is these hand grabby things. So I have seen cases, and someone has mentioned it before, where you can stand slightly behind the circle and your soul will spawn in front of you. So basically, what that means is instead of taking the dot damage from the hands grabbing you, you will avoid that damage but still be able to keep your soul rooted to grab it right after. So, yes, I still need to test that out. I'm not positive that it 100% works that way, but if that's damage you can avoid, I would absolutely do that every time. Another thing to keep in mind from a healing perspective is that later into the fight, the phantasmal parasite, the magic debuff, that will start to overlap with draw soul. Not always, but I think maybe like, I don't know, 4 to 5 or 5 to 6, that one will start to get a little bit tough, which is why um, the ones that go out where I don't have Mass Dispel, if a class can remove the debuff, the magic debuff, I tell them to use that cooldown. So I tell the rogue to cloak, mage, I tell them to ice block. Just the thing is, I can only remove one, right? So I want one DPS to be able to remove theirs, and then I dispel the other person. Because if there's soul grabby thingies, if the draw soul is going out at the same time as the phantasmal, the damage that goes out from both of those is really high, and the likelihood of somebody dying is really high. So you might as well remove the magic debuff, because there's no other reason the DPS need to use a cooldown for survival on that fight outside of that mechanic anyways. So that is the main thing that I coordinate with people on that fight. Um, Another thing that could be helpful to mention is that anytime Phantasmal is on the tank and somebody else and it's not Mass Dispel, I will always dispel the non-tank, because obviously tank is built to take damage and then they might have a cooldown up. They have more health, just like it's easier to heal the tank through that dot than DPS, because on a DPS it really chunks. On a tank, I don't really think I notice it all that much. Uh, all right, so I don't know what the fuck happened here. I think the hunter took aggro, but for these guys don't worry me too much. They do apply a bleed onto you, as you can see that the rogue just got it. So as Kyrian, if that went on me, I would file that off. Something else that I could do better right here is move into the Druid's Efflorescence, because I tell you guys all the time about how people don't move into my barrier. So I do try to make it a habit when I notice to move into Efflorescence, especially during Pride and stuff. Like, yeah, just anything like that matters. So make sure you try your best to help your healer out. I'm gonna actually make it a note to try to mention that in all of my videos, because um yeah, I just think there's a lot of things that perhaps players don't think about naturally. So I was talking to somebody about this last night, just about how for some people it doesn't come naturally for them to think in a logical way. And it's especially it could come to gaming too, because like I'm very analytical, which is why I have these um arguments. I don't want to say argument, but like I try to tell people all the time why dispelling is so important, right? And I feel like people know the argument that dispelling is good, right? There's no reason not to do it. But the argument of dispelling it immediately versus a couple seconds later, that I feel like I have not managed to get many people to understand, because like there's I, I don't know. I don't want to go into that argument. There's a lot for me to talk about when it comes to that stuff, but it's just that I feel like for players in this game, sometimes they think on a surface level when it comes to some mechanics, and I like to kind of deep dive and think about like all the variety of scenarios that you may have. So anyways, for this mini boss, as you can see, I just shadow melded the bleed. But there's also another thing that we were trying out during this run that I actually was not aware of, which is right here. You go behind the stairwell to line of sight the throw. So that's why we're all standing here, but she also charges, and since she tends to target ranged for that, she's always going to charge near the stairwell. But we do have to stand relatively close to make sure we're always getting fully behind the stairwell. The thing is, though, this mini boss is definitely not as hard as the other one. So the challenging mini boss is the next one that has a shield, the one that, like, she has a shield where she doesn't let you cast in front of her. She, the healer aggroed the Pat and he had the shadow melt. But yeah, so for the next one, that one is hard to heal because she throws the blade on you. And as you can see, it chunked him for like 40% of his health. And then immediately after, or like 1 to 2 seconds later, she casts Seismic Stomp, which is a heavy AoE damage. So if you take Blade and then you take Stomp right after, and you don't have your healer healing you fast enough right away, or you don't use a defensive, then you will die. So we'll see that in a little bit. I'm pretty sure we end up getting her on this run. Oh shit, he doesn't. Okay, he did move. I definitely try to make sure I have my cooldowns for the pack right after this one because that one is very challenging. It's actually not that bad with cooldowns, but actually, you know what? Something that I'm thinking about is I should actually try to save Vampiric Embrace for this pack and not use it on the Pride because I'm using my cooldowns on this pack already. So if I use it with this, I actually wonder if it'll just like really help out and prevent people from dying. But you kill the captain first. He casts a demoralizing shout that needs to be interrupted. If you don't interrupt that, then it places a debuff on everybody that reduces your damage taken by 50%. So that, what just happened, was pretty unlucky because I'm pretty sure the healer just got shot at. Like at the same time, like he got targeted by the ranged ones and they just chunked him. Usually if they're staggered, then you can live, obviously, but I feel like he was just unlucky. So this mini boss is way harder than the other one. See the Seismic Stomp? So, okay, I actually just noticed something that we were wondering about in previous runs. You can outrange the Stomp, but as you can see, they outrange. Oh, shoot. Yeah. Me getting the debuff along with the Druid is not good here. You never ever want two people to get it. The row was late to come by because he went to get the banner. But yeah, what I was saying is that you can outrange it, but they were all the way down the hallway, so there's absolutely no reason to go that far. We want to use the stairwell trick for this. But also, I want to comment on another thing because I've seen this happen a lot of times lately, and I just want to remind people, use your defensive cooldowns, use your defensive abilities. There's literally no downside to staying alive and using a defensive versus being dead. So yeah, I want to mention that because if you run these keys a lot, you will know every single damage pattern, ideally, because you are running them, you're experiencing them, you are getting that practice. So what I said earlier, right? I said that she throws her dagger and then she stomps after, right? So I just melded the dagger right there. But the thing is, earlier the hunter died. He had turtle up. If he, I kind of want to go back and see what his health was at. But basically, if you're at 100% and you get daggered then stomped, you won't die, but you will be very low, which means that you will have the time to pop a cooldown. It's not going to be immediate death from the stomp. It's going to be the tick after the stomp that dies from your dagger. So if you don't receive a heal before that, like I just feel like it's really important as DPS to not be a mindless DPS person, but you need to know these things. You need to know when damage is going to come, and you need to use the defensive to keep yourself alive, because I just see a lot of DPS, mages too, And mages have fucking alter time on a 1 minute cooldown, okay? Mages with Ice Block, with Blink, with Frost Nova, they have 2 blinks. I just feel like you should never die to shit. But anyways, there's a lot of DPS that die with their defensives up. And I also think that it's easier for me to say these things because I've mentioned in my Laws of Atonement video, I'm a very uh, conservative player. So I actually think it stemmed more from Dota lately in terms of what it's like for me. But in Dota, I liked to end the game with minimal deaths, right? I found that more important than anything else because dying to me is just completely useless. And it also means that I don't know, you don't care about staying alive when okay, never mind, I can't think of my argument right now, but it's very obvious, right? If you are dead, you are completely useless, like you provide a zero benefit whatsoever. However, if you are like, even in Dota terms, if you're dead, if you're low health and mana, but you kind of like stick around the fight and try to use your spells when they're off cooldown, you're providing some value, some sort of value. Same thing in WoW. If you use your defensive and you're not DPSing for like a couple seconds, sure, you're temporarily useless. However, you're still alive. And then after your defensives wear off and you manage to survive, then you will provide some additional benefits. So um, please pay attention if you can. You should never expect your healer to always keep you up from every single like amount of damage that you're taking. There are so many things that you can do to help. Never think that playing defensive is a bad thing because um, I would just say that a smart player is just somebody who knows when they can play offensively and defensively. It's just understanding of the dungeons, right? You need to be very familiar with everything. So even though that is something that I feel like disc priests need to know fairly well in order to, play their class best. So right here also, the Withering Discharge went off behind me, and that was really, really bad on my part, I would say, because he jumped past me and I should have swiveled my camera around, but I didn't. But anyways, another thing that you need to watch out for on this pack is if you do not have an interrupt, if somebody does not have an interrupt, you need to shackle undead for these sludge spewers. Shackle undead will interrupt the cast, and there's no downside to it. It will just stop their cast from going off. That cast cannot go off, ideally, right? You can live from it, but if you can prevent it, you should always manage to. And with good communication and coordination with your group, none of those should ever go off. So usually after this, we always, I think Hunter ran into that thing, but yeah, you always trout past, or you wait for the pat and just run through, or use Invis Potion if you're that impatient. But this next pack, so there's one Sludge Spewer, but generally for these packs, I would say you do kind of want to stack. So I should actually be moving in just so when those guys jump around, the melee can still get to them. So if you all move into melee, then they're all, as you can see, they're like jumping around in melee, and that's pretty much good enough. This guy, the Diseased Horror, he pretty much got a full cast of Meat Shield off, which is also not very good. It's just a big, big shield absorb, and I'd say for this pack, there are not that many things to interrupt. I actually, let me see. Putrid Butcher. So as you can see, I'm pretty sure he just gouged the Devour Flesh cast. So if that cast goes off, he heals for a good chunk. I think it's like 20%, honestly. But yeah, this disease, I'm gonna dispel it once that mom dies. Yeah. I think one stack of that is not awful enough. And I'm usually comfortable with dispelling it after everything dies, especially if it's close to dying. So for this gas bag, the AoE damage that he pulses out is actually really annoying, not always a joke. So I prefer to range that guy. I think once this sludge spewer dies, I'm gonna range it, but for now with the jumpy guys, you need to be close to make sure they're not jumping too far. I'm gonna outrange. Ooh. Yeah, see, so now I move into range, and now I use VE to help out because it's looking a little dicey. The thing is, though, oh no, 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 we don't get Pride until after next pack, that's right. Because I was gonna say, if we got Pride now, then I won't have VE for it, but yeah, 2 minutes is, it won't be up, but I think it's alright. I do think, though, ah, after I saw how much healing I was doing with my cooldowns for VE, now I'm trying to think about ways to focus VE in versus when I don't have my cooldowns up. But the thing is, I don't think you would not want it for prides as okay, let me phrase that better. I feel like you should always want it up for prides because prides in general is just like tough on the healer. Me as a shadow priest usually does not use cooldowns on the pride. But another thing is, I talked about this in HOA. I want to use boons on prides now. I did not in this run, and I have not been. It's just not a habit that I need to build. I just need. Okay, so I did fucking use it. Okay, I'm lying to you guys, but still, let's look at the healing that goes up after. So, 2 seconds. It was a little bit. It was a little bit, but actually still not bad. Ended up with 1.4k heals per second. Yeah, that's actually not bad at all. That's like as if I had a VE up, right? Okay, so this boss, I actually hate this boss the most in this entire dungeon because it's fucking annoying. He pulls you in constantly, and you have to stay close to him, ideally. So I would actually recommend you always stand close to him. That way, he does not actually pull you in. You'll see for the next one. If I'm standing close like to see this, he pulls the druid and the other person in, and they get slowed from the pull, I believe. But if you're standing close and the pull does not go off, then I'm not slowed by anything, and it's much easier for me to move out and not get hit by the AoE. If you are stuck in the AoE, you 100% need to use Disperse. For some, maybe on Fortified, you won't die. I'm not positive, but yeah, if you're ever going to hit by a mechanic that will be hard hitting, I would always recommend that you pop your defensive because instead of taking that risk of being like, oh, will I live from this damage instance, you just want to guarantee it. So yeah, standing close. I think I get clipped here. No, I don't. Wow. And another strategy that I've thought about more on this boss is just I'll dot the ads, but I'm gonna DPS the boss because since I have Psychic Link, anytime I Mind Blast the boss, I'm gonna be hitting the ads on it as well. So I actually do think that I should be using my Psychic Horror on these ads every cooldown. No reason not to. It can help reduce the damage going out to the party because they jump at people, right? But yeah, I just don't like that boss because of how frequent there's movement and that can really kill our DPS. So yeah, I don't tend to do good damage on that boss. I feel like there's definitely things that I can improve on it, but I guess for that guy, I focus more on making sure I don't get ever hit by chains because getting hit by chains is so bad. The bleed that you get takes for so much. So the thing is, I have like a get out of jail free card with a file. If I get chains, I always disperse and then I file it off once I am not stunned anymore. But obviously that's not ideal. You just want to avoid, make sure you're getting hit by that. This last boss, I actually don't think she's that bad. If I'm playing very well, I should never be hit by anything. So I actually do die on this boss later on, and I can pinpoint exactly what I should have done. Which I'm a little surprised that I didn't do, but we'll talk about that when it gets there. So for these ads, I try to silence one always. But the thing is, if I'm in a group that I don't know, I'll just say that in most of the groups that I've been in as Shadow, I can ignore the ads and they will kill them. So for the rogue, he can cleave them. I don't know what the fuck the hunter can do. Maybe he uses multi-shot or something. But for Shadow, I don't want to sear them. Like, I feel like that doesn't really do a lot, and they don't have a lot of health. So I would rather just focus the boss and let the other classes naturally cleave them down. Um, that has managed to work for me, but if that doesn't happen in your groups, obviously definitely target them and kill them. So another thing that sucked is that I think the hunter. I don't know why we drums. I forget why we drums. We have a hunter, right? But okay, so for these charging bulls, look at how close I had it. So the thing is, when these bulls spawn, you always want to be on the sides of the room. And the reason for that is because, okay, right here, look, I died because I got pulled into the ghost, those ghosty thingies, and I had power word shield up. So I could have speed boosted myself out of there, but for some reason I didn't. So that was really foolish on my part. But yes, what I was saying is that for these bulls, you always want to stand on the edge because when you stand on the edge, you normally kind of negate two of them, right? They can either spawn, they spawn in a lot of different patterns. They can either go like straight lines across, or they're coming from like a diamond. Like, see, these are the ones where they go straight across. But if you see, like, you're standing on one side, I also think it provides you a much better vantage point and being able to see where they're coming from. And also, something that I have been doing a lot lately is turning my camera down more, right? So I can have like a better view, like more of an eagle eye view instead of just looking straight ahead. So standing on the side and watching for the devastation. The thing is, if I'm ever in a really bad situation where devastation is coming and I'm getting clipped by the boar or whatever the fucking bull, yeah, I think they're called the bull, um, then I'll use disperse for that situation. I shouldn't really need to use disperse for anything else because even though I died to the ghost thing, as you saw, um, you should not die to those because you should be preemptively moving to make sure you're not even close to them because the area where they're going to spawn shows up before they appear. So you can ahead of time create a lot more space away from them. So even if the pulling thing is happening, you can um, just be far enough away where your natural movement to counteract the pulling thing will still keep you out of the ghost. So what I'm trying to say is even if you don't have a speed boost and you're getting pulled closer to the ghosts, if you, what's the word? If you preemptively moved far enough to anticipate those two combinations of things, then you'll still be safe because you anticipated that and you moved farther enough away. But even in my situation right there, I would have survived if I used Power Word Shield, but I was just stupid and I didn't. But yeah, anyways, I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, anything that I did not answer for this dungeon, please let me know and I'll answer in the comments. Thank you for watching.